Hi, I am Kalyan Reddy Daida and I will be your instructor in this course, Docker Masterclass 40 Practical Demos. So here we are going to implement 40 practical demos to understand multiple Docker concepts. And more or less for each and every Docker concept, we are going to have a practical demo. And initially, we'll start with learning about why we need to use Docker and what is the Docker terminology. So what is Docker daemon, client, image, container, and then Docker hub. So this is a theory part in this entire course. So it is going to be last for 15 minutes. Once that is completed, we'll go into the practical demos section. So we'll start with Docker basics like installing the Docker desktop and registering to Docker hub. And after that, we'll implement the demo like how to pull a Docker image from Docker hub and run the Docker container using that Docker hub. And after that, we'll also go ahead and then build a Docker image and push the Docker image to the Docker hub. Here we complete the Docker basics section. After that, we'll move on to implementing or learning each and every Dockerfile instruction with a practical demo. So we'll start with implementing Dockerfile labels. After that, we'll go ahead and learn about Dockerfile add versus copy and how at what situations we need to use Dockerfile instruction add and at what situations we need to use copy. And in addition to that, with add instruction, we can get the content from URL. Means like you can fetch the data from a URL and copy it in your Docker image. So that part also you are going to demonstrate with a GitHub package. Means like a package is present in GitHub and that one you are going to fetch using this URL and then demonstrate. So that's about Dockerfile add fetch from URL demo. From there, we'll move on and learn about Dockerfile instructions like arguments, run, expose, environment variables, and also work dir. So once those are completed, we'll go ahead and then learn about Dockerfile CMD and entry point instructions, each with a separate demo. And then we'll also learn to implement health check instruction in our Dockerfile. And we'll also learn to implement Dockerfile user instruction to run our Docker container with a non-root user. From there, we'll move on and also learn about Docker ports, how to use ports and then how to allocate dynamic ports on our host mission. So different flags available, and for all those things we are going to explore in detail. So once we complete the Docker port section, we'll move on to learning about Docker storage. So in Docker storage, we will start with learning Docker volumes, and in Docker volumes, we'll start with learning volume basics, and after that, we will learn about how to mount a Docker volume to a container, and after that, we'll also learn about how to populate data in volumes using containers, and in addition to that, how to mount a volume subdirectory in a container. We are going to learn all those things from volume perspective. And after that, we'll also learn about Docker bind mount basics and also learn about how to mount bind mounts using read only. Means like mount it in a read only option. How we are going to do that also we are going to learn. And after that, we'll also learn about Docker volume versus bind mounts when we have an existing content, non-empty dir present in our container, and we are going to mount the volume or bind mount at the same location. How it is going to behave with volume and how it is going to behave with bind mount, we are going to explicitly see that as part of this demo 21. And after that, we are also going to learn about tmpfs mount, which is a temporary file system mount. So that also we are going to learn. Once storage is completed, we'll move on to creating deploying a multi-container application in our Docker desktop. So wherein we are going to deploy a UMS web application where it is going to have a web application and underlying MySQL database. So this multi-container application we are going to deploy using Docker commands first. And after that, we'll start learning about Docker Compose, declarative way of defining Docker configurations. So here we'll start with implementing Docker volumes and environmental variables as part of this demo 24. Here we will implement the creation of MySQL DB using Docker Compose files. And after that, we'll also learn about creating a named volumes with metadata as part of this demo 25. And from there, we'll move on and deploy our multi-container app using Docker Compose. So here, as part of demo 23, we implemented or deployed that multi-container app using multiple Docker commands. Means like create a Docker network and then deploy the UMS web application, deploy the MySQL database. All these things are separate commands when you do it via Docker commands. But all those things you can define in a single Docker Compose file, and with a single command you can bring them up. So that's what we are going to do as part of demo 26. Once that is done, we'll also learn about Docker Compose deploy option. How to scale our containers. So from one container to multiple containers of the same type, we can use this deploy option and scale the replicas that we are going to do. And in addition to that, we are also going to design a 3-tier application. In the web tier, we are going to have Nginx. In app tier, we are going to have UMS web application, which is a Java application. And also in DB tier, we are going to have MySQL DB. So, and here we are going to apply this deploy for our app tier containers, which are UMS web application. And from there, we'll move on to implement networking for our multi-container application which we have deployed. So we'll have a front-end and back-end networks defined in our Docker Compose file. And in the front end, we are going to attach the services like Nginx, Web Nginx, and also App UMS. And in the back end, we are going to have App UMS and MySQL DB. So we are going to isolate the front end and back end networks so that from front end, which means from web tier, you will not be able to access the DB tier directly. So we are going to make our Docker Compose file more secure. Means like the entire design, we are going to make it more secure with demo 28. From there, we will move on to implementing Docker Compose health checks. So for this 3-tier application, we are going to implement health checks for MySQL DB and UMS web application, and also for Nginx application, right? Nginx web server. And then we will also define the startup order for these applications, which means like first MySQL should be started and then it should be healthy. Then only your app tier related servers, which is nothing but UMS web application, should be started. And once it is healthy, then only a web server should be started to send the traffic to your app tier. So like that, we will define the startup order in Docker Compose to start the containers one after the other based on their tiers. So once this demo is completed, we'll move on to implementing Docker Compose profiles. So how to define debug related services inside your Docker Compose and enable those services only when it is needed. So if you want to have a troubleshooting related container deployed as part of your application, only it need to be enabled whenever it is needed, so that you can do it using Docker Compose profiles, and then that we are going to learn as part of this demo. After that, we'll also learn about Docker Compose links and also network aliases, giving different multiple names for the same service using links or network aliases we are going to explore. And after that, we'll also learn about Docker Compose build option. And from there, we'll move on and implement Docker Compose develop watch option, wherein we will implement sync plus restart and sync plus rebuild. Once these two demos are completed, from developer perspective, these two are very, very important: sync plus restart and sync plus rebuild. So once these are completed, we'll move on to Docker build section. There in the Docker build, we'll know about build kit and buildx CLI. And once we get a clarity on those things, we'll create a custom builder here. Instead of default builders, we'll create one custom builder here in build kit, and then using that custom builder, we are going to create a multi-platform Docker image, right? We are going to generate or create a multi-platform Docker image with AMD 64 and ARM 64 supported Docker image, which will be generated using a single command. And once that is completed, we'll go ahead and then also learn about Docker build cloud. So we are going to use remote cloud builder to build a Docker image. After that, finally, we'll go ahead and also implement multi-stage builds in Docker. So these are the 40 demos we are going to implement as part of this course. And once these are completed, we will be confident in implementing any type of use case using Docker. And in addition to that, you can go to this URL where we have the complete code organized in a step-by-step manner. So if you go here, so you can see all the Docker related content and their demo files also. If you open any of these things, right, so it's equivalent demo files and then Docker files, all the things will be present in these things. So if you go here to multi-container applications or volumes, you can see here in compose, and you can find the compose file here, or you can open aliases, you can find the compose file here. Everything is clearly documented so that it will be easy for executing that respective demo, and all the Docker files for that respective demo, everything is documented in the GitHub and it is available for you. This completes the introduction about this course. I'll see you in the next lecture. Until then, bye bye. Thank you.